begin. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danae Wolf. I am the North Central Region representative for NAEP SDP and one of the co-chairs for our Professional Development Committee, along with Celeste Carmichael. We are really thrilled to have you all with us this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are for those West Coast folks. We're going to have a really great webinar here this afternoon, but before we do that, I wanted to share one quick announcement, which is that our NAEP SDP annual conference registration is now officially open. Conference will be held December 1st through 3rd this year. It will be entirely virtual, so you can join us from the comfort of your home. No travel during the winter season this year. I will throw the link to the registration in the chat when we get started. But for now, let's go ahead and jump right into introducing Paul Hill from Utah. So Paul Hill is joining us from Hurricane Utah. He is going to share with us a little bit about Utah's Rural Online Initiative, which helps connect rural communities with remote work. And Paul is a tenured Extension Associate Professor and County Director for Utah State University, where he leads economic development and 4-H STEM education programs in Washington County. So with that, Paul, I will hand it over to you. Paul did ask people to go ahead and throw questions that you have into the chat box. He will keep chat open throughout the duration of the presentation, and he will be kind of moderating some of those questions that come through. So please don't hesitate to throw questions into chat throughout the presentation. And just ensure in that drop-down menu that you're choosing to send messages to panelists and all attendees so that everybody can see the questions that you ask. So with that, Paul, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who's joined. I've seen a lot of folks from New Jersey, Ohio, looks like California. So one thing I want to ask is, what do you like about where you live? And so if you want to drop that in the chat, that'll help me kind of see. If you live in a rural area, please let me know. So if you live in rural, why do you like living in a rural community? And if you're in urban, what's wonderful about your community? And then I'm interested to know the key employment challenges in the communities that you live in. So I'll be watching the chat, and then we can kind of address these things. So some of the topics for today, we're going to talk about the rural-urban divide and the rise in remote work. And a lot of the story that I'll share kind of begins in before COVID, and we'll talk about what this rise in remote work looks like now that we're in the COVID era. I'll discuss the Utah's Rural Online Initiative program, and then the impact of our program, and a little bit about the history and how we got started, and then close kind of with what's next, what's on the horizon. So in regards to the rural-urban divide, what are the issues that rural areas face today? I'm looking in the chat, and one of the things we love about our rural communities is the closeness of being able to know everyone in your community, being able to see nature, and just the beauty of rural. But there's an issue of isolation and being away from a lot of resources, and certainly job opportunities are limited. And so in Utah, we did a needs assessment and found some of the top issues were the lack of well-paying jobs in Utah. We also have the issue of negative net migration. Our young people don't see a future in rural, and so they're leaving in droves. And as soon as they can get a driver's license or accepted to college or a job, they leave. And so we're seeing this over reliance on industry. So a lot of times what brought and created our rural communities was all based and built around extraction. So a mine, logging, and other other types of businesses. And so because of that, as those have shut down, we've seen high unemployment. And there's unfortunately this lack of educational opportunities beyond high school. And because of this lack of population and lack of job opportunities, the tax base is is limited, and there's not this opportunity to invest in infrastructure. And so the industrial base, which keeps a lot of our communities growing, is very limited. And we've seen not just high levels of poverty, but high levels of intergenerational poverty, where families with kids, are receiving assistance, and their kids are receiving assistance, and so forth from the state in order to get by. And so, some of in the chat, just looking at some, it's hard to find quality employees to stay with a company. Yeah, certainly retention's an issue. Julie, that was from Terry. Julie discusses poor internet connectivity. And so a lot of things I'll be sharing today would be what to do when you do get, internet connectivity is inevitable, but right now it's not, it's definitely not equal across the country. And certainly some areas are more limited than others. Let's just move in. Okay, here we go. Cool. So this is what, this is negative net migration in Utah, and this is over the last decade in the 2000s. So as you can see, the spike at the age of about 15 to, let's see, yeah, about roughly around 18 to 20, a little young, early 20s, young people are leaving. And we're starting to see, you can kind of also see this spike at the age of 65, and that wasn't the case in the last the previous decade. And so with this, we're seeing that not only are young people leaving for education and job opportunities, but older people, more senior citizens are leaving for reasons to be closer to healthcare opportunities. And so that's certainly an issue in these communities. Are not able to find people who can, when one thing is, when you live in a rural community, you do everything. You coach the baseball team, you're on the city council, and there's a lot on your shoulders. And so they're having, in rural communities, we're seeing across, I know in ours, it's hard to find people who will serve on a city council or serve as mayor. Looking at what the future looks like in our rural communities, and again, this is all pre-COVID, the estimated job growth, you might be able to look and see, okay, where do things look like in Ohio? But if you see any dark navy blue, that's where there's expected to have an increase in job growth. And then anything that's kind of light gray or white, I mean, we're looking at 0 to 5% or negative job growth. And as you can see, that's largely across our rural communities. And the estimate is the projections that McKinsey looked at in this particular study saw that, by 2030, we're expecting 60% of all jobs to move to these, urban centers. And that's one thing that's interesting about the Great Recession, is that we've recovered number-wise. We've recovered. We lost many jobs during the Great Recession. We've regained those jobs, but they're not in the same locations. They're not in rural communities. So rural communities not only lost jobs, but the new jobs that we gained in our economies are all in urban centers. And so we've seen that migration happen, which has really been detrimental to our rural communities. Next, when it comes to our these low growth rural areas, there's a very wide gap between our urban hubs. So as you can see in this visual, you have these high growth urban hubs where jobs are plentiful. I live in Washington County, in the bottom western corner of Utah, very close to Las Vegas. I'm closer to Disneyland than I am where my land grant is headquartered. And so in these areas where there's high population growth and job growth, the gap is just growing between these distressed cities. And a lot of that's anticipated in the next 10 years, it was anticipated, was because of automation. We're able to um, mine, more coal with machines than people. And logging, we're using machines. Agriculture, certainly, we're doing more with less, and we're more productive with less people. And so there's a push for more of our jobs being service sector, being knowledge work jobs. And so that's kind of the projection. That's what we're dealing with right now when it comes to the economy in rural and urban areas. But then COVID happens, and all of a sudden, people start. I think there's several reports that showed that in Utah, the one report showed that there was like 76% of people were working remote. And if you could, that's a lot of times organizations look and say it's not compatible. This wouldn't work here, and certainly when you're compelled to work remote, you'll find a way. And so all of a sudden, a lot of tech companies, really any company, they're looking to they almost go completely remote, except for any essential employees. And then CFOs started running the numbers. They started looking at, look at productivity, look at the lease spaces. We don't we're not using them. Well, let's get rid of them and continue to have people working from home. And so we're starting to see that, at least in Utah, many of our urban tech companies are deciding, we're canceling our leases. We're not going back to the office. And we're going to continue with this whole idea of remote work. And it's changing the landscape of what growth looked like and what those projections were that McKinsey looked at, and many other studies that looked at what does growth look like in the United States and this rural to urban migration. We started to ask questions like, will we be coming back to rural areas? And let's see here. And so some of these headlines, and there hasn't, it's so new, we haven't been able to look at hardly any studies. Really, we're just looking at various surveys and some of the new metrics of like land values in rural areas. But many journalists, thought leaders are looking at, are we going to start to see this rural to urban or urban to rural migration? And really all these projections are kind of thrown out the window because of COVID. And so one of the pieces that I wrote with Ron Wilson in Kansas State was looking at all the benefits of rural. I mean, the spread of COVID, it spread in the worst in areas where people were just stacked on top of each other, and being able to protect your family and your loved ones. There's a lot of safety being socially distanced. I talked to a rural commissioner, and he's like, we've been socially distanced for forever here in rural. This is a great place to be. And so we've seen, at least in my local high school, we saw a 10% increase in students from out of state just this year. Again, I mentioned we're close to Las Vegas. Clark County School District's completely shut down. Many families have, because of remote work, they've moved to rural parts of Utah in order for their kids to go to school. And so the guidelines that we have in place in Utah are allowing students to go to school with masks and so forth, and taking all these precautions, but they're able to also play sports and things like that. And so because of those guidelines, many people are moving and migrating to the Midwest and into rural communities. And so I'm curious to know if you're seeing that. Maybe drop that in the chat to let me know what you're seeing migration look like. Have there been, if you're in rural, have you gotten new neighbors, and are they driving Teslas? Curious about that. And let's see here. Cool. So one thing that happened a few years ago was that our governor, we saw that there's a lot of prosperity in Utah, but all this prosperity wasn't evenly distributed. Rural was really suffering with all the problems that I listed, and really high unemployment. And that was the biggest issue. I mean, with unemployment so well connected, and several studies have seen that, when the mind shuts down, we start to see domestic violence, use of opioids and things like that. So he challenged us several years ago at our rural summit to find ways to adapt to a changing market, and to find a pathway to success. And our lieutenant governor said, we're really interested in this bottom-up approach. We don't want to come into, it's nothing like urban leaders in urban communities coming into rural and saying, hey, we've got a solution for you. That just doesn't happen in rural, at least in rural Utah. We don't take kindly to city slickers coming in and telling us how we should do things. So one thing that was interesting is that we had a commissioner kind of see this idea for, hey, you know what? He had a business and he was hiring remote workers all over the world, and he wondered, well, we have all these unemployed people in my county that are receiving assistance, and they have talents, they have degrees. They're here a lot of times because a spouse brought like an anchor job, and they quit their job, and they're looking for something to do. Well, could they work remote? And just kind of talking to some, they'd never really, they knew it was possible. They didn't know how. They just didn't know where to start. And so he started looking into remote work. And in a literature review that I did, I mean, we saw between 2005 and 2015 that the majority, almost all the jobs that were created, they fell in this alternative work category. So outside of the 9-to-5 employment. And this was a study by Katz and Kruger at Harvard and Princeton. And then we also saw more recently that 35% of the workforce started to freelance. So they started using their skills, their knowledge skills on the market, and selling those things. So not just selling products, but selling their skills and freelancing, short-term gig work, and generating income in new ways. And then more recently, a study by I think it was out of Illinois, that almost 40% of the jobs in the United States, they can perform almost entirely from home. So if you spend about 60 to 70% of your day in front of a computer, there's chances are you could do all that work from home. You can be location independent. And there was an estimate of 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home. So I was global workplace analytics in the next, by 2021, and that's huge. I mean, just in 2018, that was like 16%. And so in this coronavirus era, what the workplace used to look like, I mean, people will start returning to the office, but what they return to is going to be incredibly different. And so we're excited to kind of look at what that's going to look like. What does that mean for extension? What does that mean for the clients that we serve? And so who are these people you speak of, right, that are working remotely? They fall into these three categories of being freelancers. That's short-term gig work, independent contractors using their skills, whether they're doing video editing, marketing, online marketing, chat funnels, whatever it is, but they're working for themselves. And then others are entrepreneurs, where they have a business that they're selling products, they're selling services with employees and so forth. And then remote employees who are kind of like many of us in extension, but working from home. So I live, Danae mentioned, I live in a little town called Hurricane. We call it Hurricane, but you all will see it's Hurricane. And on either side of me, my one neighbor works for Microsoft, my other works for IBM. And they travel occasionally, haven't in several months, but they work as remote employees for these companies that have adopted remote work for many years now. And so there's all sorts of jobs that are possible to work remote. I don't have on that list extension professional, but certainly many of us have been working from home, have had offices and the campus locked where we can actually go in. And so even healthcare, when my kid gets a rash, we don't want to go to the Instacare and wait in line. If we pay $50, we can get a prescription. We can Zoom with a physician. He can take a look at my kid's back and say, oh yeah, here's the cream, and write us a prescription, and we can just go pick it up, and it saves. It's totally worth the cost. So, but yeah, a lot of engineering, publishing, even travel support. Many are working from home. I ordered, I called Amazon trying to get a hold of find out where my products went, and I couldn't call them. I was able to chat, and just I was chatting with one of the employees, and I was just curious, where are you located? And she's like, oh, I'm in Florida. It's like random places all over. Where people are working. So a lot of jobs in customer support, especially now, where organizations have seen the benefits of making sure that there is someone chatting, someone you're able to call on the other line at all hours of the day. So the benefits of remote work, they're pretty obvious. You can actually, there's a lot of studies in your area. If you live in a rural community, I have one of our program participants was a receptionist at a dentist's office, was able to get a receptionist job at a physical therapy office in Manhattan. And so all the calls that were set up to meet with these physical therapists in New York were routed to Emery County, Utah, which is a part of our coal country. And she went from making $12 an hour to $38 an hour, just because of being, selling her skills in the labor market in Manhattan. And so we see people in Utah and other places pulling in Chicago, San Francisco, New York wages in rural Utah. And ultimately it's great for work-life balance. You kind of have this difficulty almost with life getting in the way of work because of the nature of working from home, but you have more of a flexibility, and it's great. It really ultimately started in the 1970s with retaining talent. So people, we're moving, I've got to go, but I'll find a new job. See you later. It's like, oh wait, you're awesome. We want to keep you, and it's a way to just attract talent and retain talent. And then also, of course, without having office space, there's significant financial savings through overhead and so forth. And so a lot of the literature out there has shown that, productivity is increased. You're able to retain the talent, and generally employees are happier. And also, when the best talent in the world doesn't all reside in the same zip code. And so you're able to get that competitive advantage of your people, and reach, greater, and provide kind of a greater diversity of thought and talent. And so if you know of any other, maybe there's something that you're really enjoying and working remotely currently. And if there is, let us know what's a benefit that you've noticed. So in 2018, I talked about our governor saying, hey, look, we need to look at new ideas for solving these problems that have just plagued rural communities. And our lieutenant governor saying, hey, we need a bottom-up approach. Well, our county commissioner in our most rural communities had this idea, and came to Extension, having the relationship that county governments, local governments have with Extension. He said, I've got this idea. If I can pitch this to the legislature and get some representatives to sponsor this idea, can Extension teach people to work remote? And maybe if we got a pilot program going, you could teach people and then place them in jobs. And if it works out and we have success, maybe it's something that we can make it a new program for Extension. And I kind of thought, eventually it kind of landed in my lap, and I was like, can we do this? Absolutely. And in the back of my head, I'm like, would this happen? No, I really had no faith that that we would, that our own legislature would take this kind of a risk. We're very conservative in Utah, and so just throwing money into Extension to come up with an innovative program. Extension hasn't been known for incubating innovative ideas, and really we've had traditional impacts, and there's this idea of what Extension does, but Extension really hadn't really tangled in this space of economic development. It's just not something that we were very involved in. And so with me being like the only Extension faculty member involved in economic development, we put this program together. It was sponsored by a representative and a senator in our state legislature, and it passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate, and was signed into law by our governor. And what was interesting about it is that, I mean, I think the only people that opposed it were like libertarian, but it was it was totally for it, and it took off in 2018, and it started with just 3 years of funding to kind of prove this concept of, could we teach people in rural to work, to get remote jobs, to start freelancing, to start an e-commerce business. And so we knew that if we took this money, we were on the hook. And if we're on the hook, we've got to deliver fast, because almost immediately the legislature's like, okay, what have you done now? It's like the next day, here's your money. It's in your account. What have you done so far? How many people have you placed? And we were just kind of like, okay. So we rolled out a kind of a play off of Master Gardener program. We call it the Master Remote Work Professional. It's a certificate that teaches people in rural communities to work remote. And then just this year, right before COVID, we saw that, we're trying to influence demand for remote work. In rural communities, they didn't necessarily have this idea to, work remote. And so we had to influence and share them this idea so that they would actually want a remote job. And then once we started doing that, and there was a lot of interest, we realized that we weren't doing a very good job connecting people in rural Utah with remote jobs in urban Utah. And it's something that was part of the legislation. Most of them were finding jobs outside of the state, and they were, enjoying those jobs and getting paid more. And so, so we created this leadership course to really sell organizational leaders on this whole concept of a remote work. And many of them were very reluctant. Part of our needs assessment showed that they were very reluctant to allow people to work outside a central office setting, this tradition of all working in the same place at the same time, set hours during the week. And then, and so that rolled out, and that's really to influence the supply of remote jobs. So not only did we want to increase demand for remote jobs, but the supply in Utah was quite low. A lot of opportunities in California, New York, and places like Dallas and let's see, Florida, as well as Illinois, Chicago area. So then this last summer, we piloted with all these kids having to work remote and do their schoolwork remote, and then potentially move into a university setting where they're working independently and asynchronously. We developed we took the same curriculum and then created a remote skills camp for 4-H members for college and career readiness. So that's what we have currently, and then more in the works. But essentially, we used the funding to hire program coordinators that lived in these rural communities, and they would focus on teaching people how to work remote, and really guiding and coaching them on their career path, and how to translate the existing skills that they had into remote skills, and find those jobs that were available, and then help them receive to skill up, some skill-based scholarships. To a lot of times they come to us and they don't really have a skill set that is transferable. They don't have experience as a knowledge worker, and they need to. There's that skills gap there that we work on. So what do? They go to our website, remoteworkcertificate.com, and they can choose to take one of our courses. Our professional course, it's free for people in rural Utah. And then if anyone in urban can take it as well, there's a fee that our legislature requires. And then we have our leadership course as well. And so people who want to participate, our program coordinators go out in the communities. They do what's called a remote work town hall. They partner up with chambers of commerce, local government. And what they do is they get together and they give this presentation, and they basically, people sign up right there and register for the course. And then the course there's a component of asynchronous and synchronous communication that happens. And so when you think about it, it's really meant to mimic the experience of being on a remote team, actually being a remote worker. And that's grounded in the theory of andragogy, as well as experiential learning. And so there are courses, all the modules that teach, how to be the best practices of remote work, how to be an effective remote worker. They're all in Canvas, and that's what our university uses for all of our courses really. And so there's that asynchronous where they're doing their work on their own time and meeting deadlines. And then these are some of the modules. So they're looking at how they effectively communicate, how they develop their workflow and to be productive and manage their time, but also how to communicate on a team and collaborate with teammates, and then also comply with security and safety, and really how to become a problem solver that's not forgotten. A lot of times when you work remote, you're on an island unto yourself, and you don't want to be forgotten. That limits your ability to move up and to progress in your career. And so focusing on your career and remote job development is certainly essential. And so there's the synchronous portion of the course where they're meeting just like we are on Zoom. And we have students from all over the state where they're building those relationships. There's this peer-to-peer mentoring, and then they also collaborate. We have a back channel. So when they're working on their modules, they're able to meet up once a week via Zoom meetings. And then whenever they need help or get stuck, they're able to help one another on Slack. And so that's our back channel. And a lot of times we're there too. We're helping and supporting, but we can't always get to them, exactly when they need it. And so the peer-to-peer support's been huge in this area. And then as they finish the course, it's a month long. It's about 30 hours to complete, and they fulfill all the requirements. They get a professional certificate, which has been very instrumental in helping some of our participants get jobs. So when they do get a job, showing that they have a professional certificate from a university that's a credential that says, I put all this time into this whole concept of remote work, and this is also for our leaders as well. This has helped some of them progress and advance in their careers. And so the process looks like they apply. We can't accept everybody. Some people don't have a computer, and so we refer them to our Department of Workforce Services for that kind of assistance. But they apply, they're placed into a cohort. We offer these each month, and they receive the training, and they focus on their skill development, and our program coordinators are helping them along the way. And then we help them with job placement. And so far, and this was numbers as of June that need to be updated, but we've had over 700 certificates awarded. And again, they're going through 30 hours of learning in these modules, and in addition to the workshops that they participate in online. And they're completing multiple projects, and again, we have a pretty decent completion rate. Most online courses that are totally asynchronous, they don't have anyone facilitating or coaching you through, they have like 99% dropout rates. I mean, and all of Harvard's computer science programs, like completely online, same with MIT, but there's not that notion of accountability, and that's what our program coordinators bring to the table with this course, is that there's accountability, there's follow-ups, we're checking in, we're coaching, and so we've had a lot of people that have expressed interest, over 1,300 now. I think that was actually probably after COVID, almost close to 2,000 now that have applied, but because of there's various challenges and barriers like financial. And so that's why we partner so well with our state to make sure all those, some people have received free computers and got their internet paid for so that they can participate in this course. And so if you have any questions you want me to address, feel free to drop it in the chat. Like, let's see here, Lisa, let's see here. Can a 4-H program coordinator in Michigan apply for the leader course? Yeah, certainly. I've had let's see, students this month came from South Dakota and North Dakota, as well as Illinois. And so, but yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit later as far as our affiliate program, so that people from other states can participate. Andrea, let's see, she mentioned located in southern East Kentucky. That's where my brother lives, actually. This is it's pretty tough with internet out there. So our program, it's really focused on what to do when you do get the internet. It's inevitable that the internet will arrive, but there was a study that looked at how many hours we have now free because of modern day technology. And it's like we have an extra 40 hours in a week that, that our ancestors didn't have. And then and then they looked at how much time we spent on Netflix. It's about 40 hours. And so some of us, but I'm sure no one on this call, but yeah, there's a lot more we can do than just stream. And if we could help bring prosperity to our communities and help families in rural stay in rural and increase their education and really prosper, then our rural communities can be vibrant again. And that's really the vision of this program. And so this is kind of what I think this was like a couple sessions. We do sessions, workshops in the afternoon and the evening, so that everyone can participate. But it was really crazy during COVID. We went from, and I'll kind of show you, we went from having like 70 people a month up to like over 300, and it's like stayed at that level. But what are some of the jobs people are getting? So Brian, he worked in customer service, like face to face. I think he worked at like Tractor Supply, and he's able to convert that ability to and develop some software skills, just user interface skills, to use software that's provided by Hubstaff to do customer service. What he was already doing. And one thing about people in rural is, like, everyone in rural is so nice, and they love to talk and they love to support customers. And so if you can do it face to face, you can do that online. Another cool one was Jessica, and she does business support. Again, she's on the phone, she's getting paid more, and she works for a maintenance company that's in Wisconsin, and that's in rural Utah. And then Erin, she works for a insurance agency in Utah. But she had a baby and was like, and her husband's in vet school, and she's like, I'm gonna have to quit my job. And so she convinced her employer with our certificate showing that she had the skills to work from home, and she's increased her productivity and was able to, the business was like, yeah, we'll see how long this lasts. But then, because they had this remote work policy in place, because of her, they were able to move other employees and to be able to move forward with this continuity of business plan and continuity of business operations during the pandemic. And then Althea, she was her skill set was that she was a paralegal, and she was able to find, she worked at I don't think she was unemployed, but she worked at a law office and wasn't like too happy with the situation there. She wanted some more time to be with her family and loved ones. And she was able to find a federal job, and with a job with the federal government, working in the Veterans Benefits Administration. And she does that completely from home. She's able to find that job through our program and totally ace the interview process. And Tanya, what's really cool about her, she's an entrepreneur, that's just in her blood. And she used one of our skill scholarships to become a UAV pilot. And she was actually just a photographer. And so she would take pictures at weddings and things like that, but she knew a lot about photography. She was able to get a drone, and now she is doing, she sells B-roll of like rural landscapes, which is just video, and sells it on her website, as well as takes pictures of homes and other scenic things for her community and for businesses all over Utah. And so she travels a little bit around the state, and she's able to show that, hey, I've got this drone license, I'm bonded, I can do all these things. And she's carved out a nice little niche for herself. And then finally, Carrie had got an accounting degree, but she had no work experience whatsoever, but she was able to find a company that just focused on e-commerce businesses, small e-commerce businesses. And now she runs the books for over 70 different little online businesses around the country. And she does that all from her home in Cedar City. So there's so many opportunities, and it's a matter of looking at the skill set that you have and saying, how could I do this, as a remote employee or as a freelancer or entrepreneur. And so we had some pretty good participation in our program. Like when we built this, we didn't know if anyone was going to show up. A lot of times we do this like needs assessment. Really our commissioners did the needs assessment. And so they kind of said, we're going to do this. We got the funding without ever really doing a needs assessment. Because again, I didn't think this was going to get funded. And so we weren't sure in the beginning if people would actually want this. And so it's very much like that field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. And we hope for that. And it turns out that was a huge need. We knew that people in rural wanted stable jobs. They wanted steady jobs that paid well. They wanted vocational training. And so this definitely, this fit. but again, we weren't really sure how well, and then things have just taken off ever since COVID. And so just to look a little bit of the behind the scenes and numbers of our participants. So what's really awesome is that the majority are female, and they're over the, half, or like they're over the age of 40. And what's really neat is like almost 70% had no remote work experience, which speaks to the level of innovativeness of women over the age of 40 in rural. And they realized, they had this realization that, hey, if I want to be successful and provide and contribute in my household, they saw that remote work is the way to go. And the majority of them, they lived in their rural county for the last 16 years. They really have no intentions to leave. And so, and over half believe that adequate wages were not available in their local region. So they see that bigger picture, and they see that this is important, and that they're looking at their long-term goals. These job opportunities in their community didn't align with what they wanted for their career. And so, and when that's the case, that's like kind of depressing. And it's no wonder there's issues, at least in our state, where there's, we have an opioid epidemic. And so really a lot of times people need work to help fulfill them and to be able to provide for their families. And let's see here. And then the majority had no intention of leaving. They wanted to be able to make it work. They love where they live. They have friends, they have family. It's a great place to raise their kids, but income is certainly an issue. And so, let's see here. Okay. So we measured knowledge. We did pre and post assessments, and we're able to see that if you look at these, all these p-values are statistically significant in these areas that we're testing their knowledge in communication, in problem solving, productivity, and planning. And so each of the modules, they do a pre-test and then a post-test, and we look at and we've seen that in the short term that their knowledge has increased from taking our course. In addition, their attitudes have changed. They've felt they're more favorable towards seeking remote work opportunities. They desire higher incomes, and they see that that's a possibility through and really a lot of them, they aren't really seeking this high income. And a lot of times in urban areas, like you look at these wages and go, well, that's not enough to live in an urban area. But for a rural area, I mean, you can really thrive making $50,000 a year. And then at the end of the course, we have them look back and let us know how they perceive their skills increased. And on a scale of 1 to 5, we've seen all these this median level that with these scores that they perceive that their skills are better, that they can manage their work-life balance, that they can communicate through technology and really develop their career and work in teams. And so what's awesome is their aspirations change as well. So they felt their value at the end of the course, they felt their value as a remote worker increased, but they also felt empowered to seek employment, remote employment after completing the course, and then they intended to. And so we know through the theory of planned behavior that if you have plans, if that's a goal, eventually if you keep working at it, it will happen. If you start with just the belief that it can happen. And so being able to sell this idea to the legislature, like, hey, our program is successful, we increase knowledge, we increase their skills, and we've changing their attitudes about what's possible in a rural community. When you go to the legislature, they're like, well, show me the numbers. Like, that's all great. That's warm, fuzzy stuff. But they want to know, what are your job placements? And when you compare apples to oranges, when you compare like, oh, these are the jobs we created in rural, it's like, so what? Like, we could go find a business to move, and relocate a business from California to Utah and get that many jobs. Like, that's not a big deal in across the state, but you really need to be able to compare apples to apples. And so we use the index that the state actually created. It's a multiplier calculation that looked at what's a value of a job. What's the value of a job in in urban versus rural. So like how many jobs does it take in rural community to kind of equal the impact of one job in an urban area? And so in some of these communities, when the population's so low, there's like 1,000 people, one job in these communities is worth, 74, 48, 99 jobs in an urban community to have that same economic impact. When you're able to keep 4 or 5 families in a rural community, that changes the community. They're able to contribute more. The tax base is increased. It's a huge deal. And so we had to use this scale in order to convince our legislature to compare apples to apples. And so, I didn't update that. So we're at 133 remote jobs that have been placed in the program. So every 3 days, it's like a new job placement, and that rate's increasing. And so now we're over 5,000 jobs. So the economic equivalency, that those 130 jobs are equivalent to over 5,000 jobs relative to urban counties. And so, and what's great is that even though those people that hadn't found remote work yet, that the majority, 76%, actually intended to seek remote work. And so that was their goal. And then we still continue to work with them. Many have a skills gap. And so that's something that they're working on. And bear in mind, this program just barely turned 2 this year. And so, and what's great is the people that did find remote work, they were more, satisfied with their position. They saw an increase in their salaries, and they believed there was hope. There was this idea that they would have an increase in their salaries going forward. And so, and those that didn't were still looking. They were still developing their skills and looking for those opportunities. And so, in order to, we've got people that want work, we need to supply the jobs for them. And so we developed the leadership course, which is meant to influence leaders to adopt remote work in their organization, to create these remote jobs so that we could fill them and connect the people in the rural talent with these jobs. And so we've had quite a few. Let's see, we just started in February. We've had over almost 140 people that go through the course in 4 different cohorts. Majority are female, and the main deliverable of this course is creating a remote work plan for their organization, writing it down, putting together the policies and procedures that they can take to their legal counsel or whatever to make it a policy. And so this has been phenomenal. They've seen gains in knowledge from what we teach in that course, which is how to deal with maintaining your culture, how to communicate your vision, how to manage for performance over presence. A lot of the online shopping takes place during the business day. And so a lot of times remote work, a lot of times people say, oh, remote work, we started remote working and we noticed all these people were shopping online and checking Facebook. And it's like, and I have to remind them, like, remote work doesn't, it's not a problem for organizations. What it does, it actually reveals problems that were already there. And because you're focusing on performance, not just presence. Just because they're in their chair doesn't mean they're working. And then also how to deal with conflict management. I mean, there's communications issues that need to be addressed. And so the ultimate challenge of a leader is to be able to lead at a distance. And that certainly takes a learning curve. And you all have noticed that our leaders, many of us, and our those at our universities have struggled. When all their people are gone, and they're still trying to inspire them and to get them to buy into the vision and to continue to do their work. So attitudes changed. They were more positive towards remote work. We saw that their skill sets, they perceive their skill sets to increase and improve in those areas. And then all of them felt this idea of remote work. They had a more positive outlook on it. They felt empowered to hire remote workers. And I was worried that there'd be this like urban rural bias, like, oh, well, people in rural, they don't know how to do this kind of stuff, I can't hire them. But 87% said they would hire a qualified remote worker from rural Utah. And so that was certainly, as a worry of mine, but it's certainly not the case. And then this is just kind of a little success story from one of our participants who took our course, immediately went out and created like 7 remote jobs. Last I heard, it was like he had hired 12 people working remotely from rural Utah. So that course has been incredible. We offer that every other month. And so during COVID, what we did is we had this huge spike in participation, and we decided, you know what, let's offer this course for free for all of our participants. And many of these participants, you know, while we said we had 130 job placements, another 120 converted their jobs to remote during this time. And then our remote skills camp is totally developed. It's meant to address this idea of negative net migration and people in changing the mindset that there's a future. I can have a career in rural and stay in a community that I love, or I can get my education, I can return. That's an option. We want them to know that that's an option. And so we have a lot of guest speakers in order to keep the youth engaged on their screens. Is we got to have some really awesome people that show up. And so we had people that work for YouTube, Google, Facebook, and NASA. They would come and present. And one of the presenters was her name is Candy, and she ran the camera on a satellite that orbits one of the moons of Jupiter, and she does it all from her home in rural Utah. And so sky's the limit. You know, the solar system is the limit to what you can do with remote work. And the kids absolutely loved it, and we sent them all care packages with T-shirts so that they could, you know, feel more connected and part of it. But again, they do the 4-H pledge. It's just like a 4-H club, virtual 4-H club. And they learned all the ins and outs of how to effectively communicate, and which is going to help them in not only in their careers, but also in their education. And then we started an affiliate program because we had so many of our land-grant university friends reach out and to say, how can we bring this to, you know, my rural community? And so, yeah, our leader class, I think, Monica, yeah, it's offered, you know, people out of Utah can certainly participate. We had a few this last session. Let's see here. Catherine asks, as part of the launch of the program, did you get commitments from employers to hire people from the initiative? We didn't, not really. Like, we just let them know, like, hey, these, you know, we're constantly working on those relationships to make sure that, we just found one with a company called Instructure, and they're like, we have 40 jobs right now that we could hire, you know, your participants, like, please send them our way. And what's great is Utah created some legislation that gives them like a $5,000 to $7,000 after tax credit for hiring someone in rural Utah, paying them a decent wage. I think it was like 110% of the county's average wage, and then keeping them employed for a year. And so if they've done that, then they get that $5,000. And that's huge for these businesses that are growing and trying to hire as many people as possible. So our website, I think we've just actually, the affiliate, I think, yeah, if you just go to remoteworkcertificate.com/affiliate, you can learn about our affiliate program. It is up now. And then anyone that's interested, we ask, like, take the professional course first, get a feel for what it is and what it takes. And while you're not looking for a remote job, pay attention to kind of how it's run, because having the support of program coordinators, boots on the ground to develop relationships with people, that's how connections are made. That's how jobs are placed. And so we're working on curriculum for training incarcerated populations, and then we've just piloted an e-commerce workshop series, and then we're in the process. Our legislature gave us funding ongoing. They removed the sunset clause for this program. They really likened it unto the rural electricity. Let's see, yeah. Anyway, there was the Rural Electrification Act. Yeah, the Rural Electrification Act of like 1936. They were like, wait a sec, we're all working remote, at least a day a week, 2 days a week. Our kids are working remote, you know, on their schoolwork. Like, broadband is essential just as electricity. And so when I presented this before our legislature, they were like, light bulb went on literally and said, hey, look, we need to invest more in broadband infrastructure, and not only just broadband infrastructure, but we need the educational program in place to actually help people utilize and leverage broadband, so that they're not just streaming all day and Snapchatting. So we're in the process of expanding to 21 all the rural counties in Utah, and then even looking at urban counties that need that want to reduce air pollution and traffic and things like that. So that's kind of that's what we have in the pipeline coming up. And let's see, I think that's about it. Oh yeah, and then a lot of the numbers I shared, like the stories behind the numbers are found on our podcast. So we have about 30 episodes that are up. We can't interview everyone, but if you go to if you just look at Remote Work Radio on like iTunes or Stitcher, you'll be able to find some of those stories behind the impacts of what we're doing. And so that's been really good. We send out a weekly newsletter to communicate our impact, share our success stories. That's been absolutely essential in communicating with stakeholders, and then making videos about the success stories. And then just tout my team. They're amazing and really innovative. They took the job without really knowing what my plans were, and I didn't really know what my plans were, but they stuck with it, and so we got the Innovation and Creativity Award from NACDEP this last year. So pretty proud of them and all the awesome work that they did. But yeah, if you have more questions, I think you can drop them in the chat. But I think we're almost out of time.
Well, we did have a few questions come through our Q&A, which were, how large are the cohorts? And I know you have a couple different programs, so those cohort sizes might differ. And then what's the cost for people outside of the rural communities that you're focused on, which get it for free or can participate for free? Yeah.
We've had cohorts, I think well over 300 in some months. Generally, it's around 100, 150. And that's been adequate, and we're able to handle that. It's kind of our capacity. Our legislature, we asked, we said, hey, if we allow people from outside of Utah to participate in our course, it actually gives our students, our target market in Utah, just a better experience. Being able to work with people across state lines and time zones enhances this experience, and then they're exposed to greater diversity, and which is going to make them a more valuable employee and help them get hired. And so our legislature's like, okay, that's fine. These are Utah tax dollars. So they said, they actually required us now to start charging everyone in rural. I think I did say it was free earlier. Just starting next month, they have to start paying $20 just so they have some skin in the game, because our drop-off rate, like some people kind of sign up and they're like, I'm not sure this is for me. And so if they haven't paid anything, they don't really have skin in the game. And so we are charging that now. And then in urban communities, the professional course is $99. And then anyone out of state, it's $199. And then our leadership course is $249 across the board, everyone in and out of Utah. So yeah, anyone can participate. But yeah, thanks Monica, thanks Catherine, Lisa, Terry, appreciate the comments. Oh, and thanks, yeah, Lisa, thanks for dropping the link inside the chat. That's awesome. And Celeste, thank you.
Yeah, so with that, we're right up on 4 p.m. Eastern time. Thank you so much, Paul, for being here today. We had a lot of really great questions come through. I think if you did have specific questions about either offering this in your state or collaborating with Paul and Utah, feel free to reach out to Paul directly. I don't want to speak for him, but I think he would welcome those conversations. So again, thank you so much. We're thrilled with that. And one more reminder that NAEP SDP annual conference registration is open, and I will throw the link in the chat for those of you who are still on with us. And that way, if you want to check it out, we do anticipate publishing breakout session information in the next weeks. So keep an eye open for that information as well. Let me make sure I can publish this link. All right, there it is. So have a great afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This was our last of our professional development series, our webinar series for NAEP SDP. So thrilled to have you all on board. And again, Paul, huge thank you. I bet when you started this program 2 years ago, you probably could have never imagined just how important it would be this year after everything that's happened with COVID and remote work. So kudos to you and your team for this.
We got lucky, but yeah, it's been awesome. So thanks for the stage and letting us kind of share what we're doing. But hopefully, if anyone wants to kind of plug in or let this inspire you to do something similar in your communities, it's definitely a need right now.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you soon.